You're listening to Civic Media. You can tune into any of our live shows on any radio station across the state with the Civic Media app. Find us in your phone's app store and listen anytime, anywhere. This is your WXCO Daily News Roundup for Bull Falls Radio, 98.9 FM and 1230 AM in Wausau.
For WXCO News, I'm Brittany Merlot. 88 Wisconsin farmers are currently waiting on millions of dollars promised to them by the federal government. The Dairy Business Innovation Program gives grants to more than 400 dairy farmers across the country to allow them to grow. Under the Trump administration, the U.S. Department of Agriculture has frozen the payments, and 88 Wisconsin farmers were waiting on $6.5 million. Farmers who are due to get the money applied for it in 2023, were approved in 2024, and started working on projects like growing or updated technology, knowing that they'd be reimbursed. So without that reimbursement, they could be in trouble. The Wisconsin Cheesemakers Association says half of the grant recipients are small farms with fewer than 5 employees. They'll be traveling to Washington, D.C. this week to push for the release of this money. Senator Tammy Baldwin is also asking the USDA to resume the payments. She spearheaded the program. And Senator Ron Johnson held a virtual town hall meeting with Wisconsinites last week. Melissa Kay has more.
When asked where he stands on Ukraine, Johnson said the war started by Russia has to end.
I've repeatedly said Vladimir Putin's a war criminal. He's obviously the aggressor. He didn't have to start the war.
Johnson also said the reality is Vladimir Putin will not lose this war.
The only way the war ends is in a negotiated settlement. You can quibble with how you negotiate that, but I'm not going to like the result.
Johnson said the longer the war goes on, more people will die.
The result will get worse and worse because more Ukrainians die, more of Ukraine gets destroyed, more Russian conscripts die. Take no joy in that.
Senator Johnson said he supports President Trump's efforts to end this war that Russia started.
Average gas prices fell 5 cents in the past week for an average of $2.80 today. The promised tariffs from the Trump administration could not only create economic uncertainty, but also impact what some motorists pay at the pump in the weeks ahead. Senator Ron Johnson spoke with Wisconsin constituents during a virtual town hall last week. Here's Melissa Kay with more.
Senator Johnson answered a question about President Trump pardoning all January 6th offenders, even those with criminal backgrounds.
In the end, I think Trump just got frustrated with all the detail, and he finally said, just pardon them all.
Johnson said he thought there was a miscarriage of justice in some cases.
Again, you take a look at all of it. In the end, I didn't have a real problem with what President Trump did, even though I probably would have done it differently.
5 people died during or soon after the riot on January 6, 2021, and the Capitol sustained more than $2.9 million of damage.
And the Wisconsin State Assembly held a hearing on a Republican bill that would require sheriffs to assist in federal immigration enforcement. This bill would require sheriff's office personnel to ask for proof of citizenship or legal status from any individual arrested on felony-level charges and report unverifiable status to federal immigration officials. It also threatens to cut state aid to offices that do not adhere to the requirements. Governor Tony Evers has already said he will not sign legislation if it advances to his desk. And fears of the immigrant community were heard in a roundtable discussion in Green Bay last week. Here's Lisa Hale with more.
Wisconsin Attorney General Josh Kaul.
A lot of the fear we have heard, that we heard about today, relates not to specific actions that have been taken, but to rhetoric that's been out there. So discussions about raids at schools or raids at churches.
While the roundtable discussion with Kaul, 89th Assembly Member Ahmad Rivera-Wagner, and Green Bay Mayor Eric Genrich with members of the immigrant community was not open to the media, a press conference was held afterwards. Genrich said that while immigration enforcement is focusing on dangerous criminals in Green Bay, immigrants are welcomed and needed in the city.
Wisconsin sees its first ever dip in alcohol-related deaths following the spike in 2020. Alcohol consumption remains a significant issue in Wisconsin, with the state health data showing that 1 in every 5 adults has engaged in binge drinking in the past month. The most recent data shows a drop in alcohol-related fatalities from 2022 to 2023, marking the first recorded decrease in years. Before this, alcohol-related deaths had increased annually since the DHS began tracking them in 2014. And since then, at least 27,000 people have died from alcohol-related causes in the state. The biggest year-over-year increase came between 2019 and 2020, when alcohol deaths rose nearly 18%. The DHS classifies alcohol-attributed deaths into 2 categories: acute, which includes fatalities from causes such as drunk driving crashes or alcohol poisoning, and chronic, which refers to long-term effects like liver cirrhosis or cancer. DHS data reveals that alcohol-related acute deaths alone outnumber opioid deaths in the state. And a Wisconsin Republican congressman has introduced legislation that would repeal a federal program that provides funding to states to build their electric vehicle infrastructure. Wisconsin was awarded over $78 million through the Biden administration to develop fast charging stations across the state. So far, $23 million has been allocated for 53 of those stations. The bill from Congressman Tony Weed could cost Wisconsin about $55 million allocated for the EV chargers. And speaking of costs, the Green Bay Packers released their ticket prices for the upcoming season, and fans are going to have to spend a bit more money. Regular season tickets will increase between $7 and $21 per game. Of course, it depends on where you want to sit at Lambeau. Preseason ticket prices are roughly half the regular season prices, and those will increase between $3 to $11 per game. The Wisconsin Natural Resources Board will be hosting public hearings on standards for PFAS contamination in groundwater over the coming weeks. At their meeting on Wednesday last week, the board unanimously voted to hold the hearings on proposed standards that mirror Environmental Protection Agency recommendations. The standards would be set at 4 parts per trillion for the 2 most common PFAS compounds and 10 parts per trillion for the less common compounds. And the current Wisconsin drinking water standards are at 70 parts per trillion. And Wausau is proud to have 4 skiers from its United Cross Country ski team represent us in the 2025 Cross Country Junior National Championships. The event will be held in Utah at Soldier Hollow. That's where cross-country ski events for the 2002 Winter Olympics and the 2034 Winter Olympics were held. And of course, the relatively mild winter this season has certainly played a role in the training process. 9 Mile County Forest was only open for about 4 days last winter and just 3 weeks this season. The team has stayed resilient through it all, though, and when there is no snow, they roller ski. Their equipment truck is set to head out to Utah tomorrow, and the 4 skiers fly out on Friday. They're set to compete on Monday, March 10th. And with plenty of rain in the forecast and spring weather sneaking in, the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources is sharing gardening tips with residents that don't involve using non-native plants. The tips come in honor of National Invasive Species Awareness Week, where Wisconsin has seen some troublesome invasive species spread across the state in recent years, especially the emerald ash borer. Experts say the invasive beetle could destroy 99% of ash trees in the state. DNR officials say residents should use native plants like joy pie weed in their gardens. They say it looks great and benefits pollinators. I'm Brittany Merlot for WXCO.
Wisconsin falls short to the Spartans. Hi, I'm Mike Clemens with sports. Men's college basketball. The Badgers had the lead at halftime, but lost to the Spartans at Michigan State, 71-62. Badgers head coach Greg Gard.
You're always going to build your program and your team to be able to survive those. And the 2 things that we didn't do well enough when you have one of these 5 for 32 games, and part of that's Michigan State's defense. Part of it, we had good looks. I thought we had some really good looks at times from the right guys.
Up next, Wisconsin plays the Gophers in Minnesota Wednesday night. Marquette with a win over the weekend at Georgetown. They head north to face UConn on Wednesday. UW-Milwaukee had no trouble against Detroit Mercy. The Panthers winning 89-67, securing the number 3 seed in the Horizon League tournament. And the number 1 ranked Wisconsin Badgers women's hockey team shut out Bemidji State in Madison 11-0. So the Badgers advance to the first round of the WCHA playoffs Friday in Duluth. With sports, I'm Mike Clemens.
On your entertainment beat, I'm Pete Schwaba. Creators of the legendary show Cheers recently addressed Shelley Long's exit from the show after 5 seasons. Creators Glenn and Les Charles appeared on the Where Everybody Knows Your Name podcast with hosts Ted Danson and Woody Harrelson. The brothers Charles say they weren't sure the show could go on after Long left because it was so based on the hot and cold relationship between Sam and Diane. During the same episode, the producers admitted that Woody Harrelson was not their first choice, but Ted Danson went to bat for him, and sitcom history was made. To say things are really escalating in the Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni multiple lawsuit drama would be an understatement. The actress has sued Baldoni for sexual harassment during the shooting of It Ends With Us, and Baldoni has countersued Lively for running what he and his people say is a smear campaign. Lively appears to be going for a checkmate move and has hired a former CIA PR crisis manager. Sounds like it's only a matter of time before Putin is involved. As it turns out, not everyone in Hollywood wants to be a part of a superhero movie and is willing to pass on big fat residual checks. Jeremy Allen White, star of the Emmy-winning show The Bear, has passed on the title role in DC Universe's Sergeant Rock. In a recent interview, White said he is confused at the idea that the pinnacle of an actor's career seems to be a role in a superhero film. Then again, maybe he just doesn't like to wear tights. And then there's Chris Pratt, who seems to have no problem playing superheroes as long as the check cashes. I feel you, brother. Pratt has announced that he will play Star-Lord when the character returns to the Marvel comic universe by way of Guardians of the Galaxy. Pratt is currently one of the busiest actors in Hollywood, as he is starring in The Electric State with Millie Bobby Brown on Netflix, and you can catch him in the sci-fi film Mercy, which will be released this summer. I'm currently 3 episodes into the new season of Reacher, and so far I would recommend it as a Pete pick. Actual giant Alan Ritchson has returned as the title character, kicking butt and taking names. Season 3 so far has more of a feel like Season 1, where Reacher stays true to the character, giving assistance to the underdog and those in need. Reacher Season 3 gets a so far so good rating. Stay tuned. Spoiler alert regarding White Lotus Season 2. Season 3 of the hit HBO show is underway. White Lotus is always set at a White Lotus resort, where in episode 1, we learn a murder has been committed, but don't find out who the victim is or who done it until the last episode of the season. Jennifer Coolidge was the victim in Season 2 and says she hopes that her on-screen husband, played by John Grise, is the victim in the 3rd season. That seems the obvious choice, but writer-creator Mike White likes to keep the audience guessing. You can catch White Lotus at 9 p.m. on Sunday nights on Max. For more showbiz fun, tune into Nightlight with me, Pete Schwaba, weeknights from 6 to 8 p.m. on the Civic Media Radio Network.
We are tracking a system that could bring some heavy rain and rain mixing with and changing to snow tomorrow night through Wednesday, and there could be some accumulation and wind with blowing snow with this one, so stay tuned for updates. Today, partly cloudy, becoming cloudy by late afternoon with a high in the mid-40s. I'm meteorologist Sean Cable. Right now, it's 31.
That's your WXCO Daily News Roundup from Civic Media. Subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you find your podcasts. Find more news at bullfallsradio.com. The national news cycle never stops, but it can be hard to find news about your local community. Civic Media is dedicated to providing quality local and state news coverage across Wisconsin. With the Civic Media app, you can get notifications about local stories that matter to you and your community. Find the free Civic Media app in your phone's app store and choose notifications from the menu to tell us what kind of news you want to hear about.